Today's guest on the 1% podcast, we are joined by Ben Petzinger. Ben is the Director of Operations lead for their Boise office. We're going to be talking to Ben about his life growing up here in the Treasure Valley, then having moved all over the country, worked in a number of different markets. We had a great discussion about career, about growing up, the way that his life being raised as the son of a German immigrant impacted a lot of the decisions that he made in life, owning small business as a kid, working his way up, gaining a lot of knowledge through education. One of the things that I took away was Ben talked about earn while you learn, a phrase that I grew to love. We talk a lot about integrity and learning how to grow and develop in your career and create value. So great discussion with Ben today, and excited to let you hear the podcast.
First job, I show up, they hand me a shovel and say, go dig a bunch of holes. I spent a week digging holes in an alleyway behind this building. After a week, Lee calls me into the office. How's it going out there? I said, fine, it's great. We're hooking up the saddles, I'm hammer drilling. I've got the epoxy set. We're about ready to bring in the skid steer with the hydraulic ram. I'm understanding the foot-pounds of torque and how we're gonna do this. He's like, you're not gonna complain about digging holes all week? I said, Lee, if you're gonna pay me this much to dig holes, I'm good with it. You think I don't know how to dig a hole? This is fine. I'm learning a lot.
I grew up in Caldwell, Idaho, digging holes.
Yeah. If it doesn't get any worse than this, I can handle it. And then when it would get worse, he would say, okay, this is pretty terrible, but I'm handling it. So if it doesn't get any worse than this, I can keep going and I can handle it. When, kind of a hard time on a job or a task or whatever, he's like, no, you can handle it. Just keep going.
I think the way that we communicate with ourselves has a massive impact on the way that we communicate with others, the way that we show up, and ultimately the way that we think.
And there are chapters where you have to lean in, and sometimes you can lean out. And I guess I'm going right back to having a good spouse, because when I've had to lean in at work, I know that things on the home front are taken care of because Jelena she's just awesome. She's got it. I was running late this morning, and I've fed the cows with this shirt. I've got hay in my pocket, and I went in the bathroom. I was still finding it under my collar. I'm like, of all days.
I love it. I love it. That's real, though. That's authentic.
One of those mornings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
are we good? Okay. Ben Petzinger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. We've been trying to catch up for a while, and so I'm glad we finally got you on here.
Well, it's an honor to be invited. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We were kind of talking off air a little bit that, selfishly, I just started a podcast because I want to invite people on that I want to learn from. And so I just ask questions that I would want to know. Hopefully other people find benefit in that as well. And it's been really fun and fulfilling for me, all the messages that I get from people that listen to the podcast or see the clips or whatever, and either have a connection to one of the guests, or they say that something like really connected with them and they learn from it. And so, that's been one of the fun things for me, is just I'm asking questions of things that I want to know about you. And obviously you and I have been friends for a number of years. So there's some things that I already know, but looking forward to learning a lot more things that I don't know yet. So.
Well, great. It is April 1st, so I'm waiting for the door to open, and just the gig is up, because I don't, if you're looking for somebody like that, I hope I can deliver.
I assure you this is real, and we're live. So,
okay.
Let's just start at the beginning. I start every podcast letting the guest kind of introduce himself to the audience, who you are, where you grew up at, family dynamics, mom, dad, siblings, kind of what all your early life growing up looked like.
Sure. Man, I love that question. I am the youngest of 5 boys, and the Petzinger family, we're from Canyon County. And I grew up out by Lake Lowell a little bit. So you take Farmway Road, Wagner Road, Ustick, Homedale. That's our stomping grounds growing up. And grew up on what my brothers and I like to call a dysfunctional farm. It was kind of an experiment of sorts with my parents. My dad is a German immigrant, and he immigrated to the U.S. in the late 50s, and just carved out a life here in the States. Worked really hard to get an education at University of Utah, got his teaching certificate. His first interview and his first job was Caldwell High School. And so he stayed there for 30 plus years.
What did he teach?
So Werner Petzinger, he taught, at first it was architectural drafting, and then he had to modernize into AutoCAD. And he was right there when AutoCAD first came out. I remember him going to College of Southern Idaho to get the training and the certification, and then Caldwell School District invested in the computers, and it was right when that was starting to change to more of a digital format. Yeah. But he was all about the board drafting. Even when that happened, he had the students master the two-dimensional side of drafting. He also taught German. He taught Russian, some math. And I think he was the Saturday school principal even. Okay. So he did quite a bit. Yeah.
So going into his background a little bit, if he didn't immigrate until the 50s, right? Like you see a lot of German immigrants came over at the end of the Second World War.
Yeah.
He obviously would have stayed for 10 plus more years there. Was he living in East Germany or West Germany, or do you know much about like what that time period looked like?
Absolutely. Okay. Regrettably, my dad passed away 21 years ago. So he taken way before his time, pancreatic cancer. And so we knew quite a bit about his upbringing, but we learned quite a bit more when we had a chance to be with him when he was terminally ill on hospice. And all 5 of us brothers took some time to spend with him, record his personal history, and really delve into that. And we've got that recorded. It was a great project for us. But he was born in 1938 in Darmstadt, Hessen, which is West Germany. And so he lived through the war as a child. In fact, this is interesting you brought this up. So you guys do the best functions, like honestly, hands down, best in the industry. And you invited Jelena and I to one of your events at the Warhawk Museum. Yeah. And I remember waiting in line to get a name tag, and they had a table of binders, just random. I don't want to say random. To them, I'm sure they were organized. To me, it just was a bunch of binders. And they were flight logs and journal entries from World War II bomber pilots. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I just chose one random binder, flipping through the pages, and I see December, I think it was the 24th. I think it was Christmas Eve, 1944, or it could be 45. I don't want to quote that wrong. I've taken photos of it, but what caught my attention was at the top, it said Darmstadt. And this is a U.S. bomber pilot who recorded his flight log from England, and it was really abbreviated. It said, took off from England, no issues on the way, however he worded it. Target acquired, bombed away, returned, no problems. Well, that would have been directly over my dad's apartment building or my grandparents, and they would have experienced that firsthand. And so that's the backdrop of being raised as a Petzinger a little bit. He was not the type that held on to that in a way of bitterness or anything that carried trauma to us, but it certainly affected how he raised his sons very, very much. And so he had a lot of challenges growing up, as you can imagine. He was the oldest of 3. I've actually talked about that journal entry with my uncle, who's still with us. He's a retired lieutenant colonel, U.S. Army, very accomplished guy. My aunt, the kindest, sweetest person in the world, she's still alive, lives in Sandy, Utah. And I've talked to both of them, and they both corroborate that story that, oh yeah, they do remember that bombing. And so they survived it. My dad was just a kind of a Renaissance man, to be honest. He accomplished piano player. He read and understood all the great philosophers, spoke multiple languages. He was a teacher. And so I felt like a lot of his upbringing style was to teach. He was an instructor. And my brothers and I, shortly after he passed away, This would be 2006, 2007. My oldest brother, James, he had an idea that we should record some of our stories. He put together the first podcasts that I'd ever been on. Not that it was for commercial use, or it wasn't even for mass consumption. It's the Petzinger Brothers podcast, and I think we did over a dozen or so get-togethers, and we had an old school way of recording it, and just reminiscing and trying to make sense of that growing up years in Canyon County and the unique circumstances and just the work, the miscellaneous jobs we did, the absolute pieces of garbage cars that we drove, and just the funny stories to get together with your brothers. And a lot of that does revolve around my parents, and especially my mom. She's amazing. She's in her 80s now. She's just as elegant and beautiful as she's always been. And she still works. We can't convince her to stop working. She puts in a lot of hours every week, and that's kind of the makeup of being in the Petzinger family was hard work. Yeah.
Was your mom an immigrant as well, or was she from the United States?
American pie,
Okay.
apple pie. Just in fact, she was an Air Force brat.
Okay.
Lived all over the world with her parents. My grandfather was in the U.S. Air Force. Yeah. So Japan, Morocco, all over the United States, Panama. She grew up in a pretty varied background.
Well, as you were telling that story about being at our VIP party, that just gave me goosebumps. I remember that event, and I remember you pointing that out.
That
to
was
me
incredible
at the time.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be a coincidence of I would say all coincidences, but that's a pretty sizable coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Or so it may seem to some. And I don't believe in those kinds of things. And I think that those types of opportunities or ways of communicating or connecting us to our ancestors or people that have gone before us, or God reaching out to have a connection with us in our life. I think that those sorts of things happen when we're looking for them. And but thank you for sharing that story, because I don't want to say I'd forgotten about it, but it wasn't something that was in the forefront of my mind, or even that I planned to talk about today.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you reminded me of that. You said that you felt like your dad growing up in Germany during World War II affected a lot of the way that he raised you guys.
For sure.
How do you feel like that impacted your life growing up?
Well, I'll give you an example. He described one of his responsibilities at 6 and 7 and 8 years old, when the war was at its peak, when the Allied forces were really, coming in and rightfully so, putting an end to Hitler's reign. They had to leave their city, Darmstadt, and they went out into the countryside. They had a relative that said, "Hey, we'll take you in." So this is my grandmother with 3 kids. My grandfather, he was in his 30s. And by that time, the draft age had crept up far enough, and he was a civil structural engineer. He was not a military guy, but he was forced into the military for Hitler's army. And he was sent to the Russian front in, present-day Crimea. History rhymes, and there's still war there now, and that's where he fought and was severely injured. He did survive the war, but while he was gone, one of my dad's many responsibilities, was gathering firewood. And he'd, in the summertime or in fair weather, he'd have a wagon and he'd pull it into the Black Forest near the place they were living, and he'd find sticks and pieces of wood or bombed out buildings, and he'd gather all of that so that they had cooking fuel and heating fuel. And we didn't really know a lot about that, but he did tell me it was hard, and he would tell himself, if it doesn't get any worse than this, I can handle it. And then when it would get worse, he would say, okay, this is pretty terrible, but I'm handling it. So if it doesn't get any worse than this, I can keep going and I can handle it. And so I think he reinforced that with us in how he really didn't show a lot of sympathy if we were having, kind of a hard time on a job or a task or whatever. He's like, no, you can handle it. Just keep going. And so there are a lot of instances in his early childhood that affected how he was raising us. Yeah.
I think that's almost unbelievable that a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old at the time would have been having that sort of internal dialogue, right? Like, I think the way that we communicate with ourselves has a massive impact on the way that we communicate with others, the way that we show up, and ultimately the way that we think. And so the fact that he had that type of an internal dialogue at such a young
Yeah.
age, I think speaks
Yeah.
to,
It reminds me of a funny connection. Before reclaimed barnwood was even a thing,
yeah.
there was Werner Petzinger combing the countryside of Canyon County looking for barns that were ready to be torn down. You know, he had summers off as a teacher, and we were his workforce. And he would say, okay, we've got a barn we're going to go tear down. And it wasn't that he got a piece of equipment and shredded it. We took it down piece by piece.
He had some boys with some hammers and ropes and whatever. And
it was, at the time, I thought it was ridiculous. And I'm very young doing this, and I remember stacking every single board with nails in them. We'd take them home, and then he'd have us pull the nails out one at a time, rusty, old nails. And then he'd have us straighten the nails and put them in a coffee can or something. And I'm like, what is, well, he would save some of the good wood, and we learned how to look at wood. Is it checked? Is it curled? Is it suitable? And we'd put it in one pile. If it wasn't, we'd put it in another pile, and he'd cut it up with a skill saw and he'd burn it. I'm guessing he burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars of perfectly aged barn lumber that today people would be cladding a house in Sun Valley or McCall. It would be, it'd be an incredible find, but he burned it up quickly for heat in the house.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that was just his, we always had cords and cords of heat wood. Never did we have a situation where we didn't have enough heat for our home.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of carried over, but it was at a very young age. I remember he took me along to the hardware store, and it was in Caldwell, and he was buying some plumbing parts or something. And I walk in the door, and I look to my right, and I see this wall of shiny nails. And I walk over to these nails, and they're all in buckets on the wall, different sizes, different uses. And I put my hands in that bucket of nails, and I'm like, these are brand new. I need to make sure my dad knows about this. So I ran in and I found him in an aisle. He's like putting a P-trap together. He's getting some parts. I'm like, Dad, you would not believe what they sell here. They sell nails. We don't have to straighten those rusty old nails. And he looked at me. He's like, you knucklehead. That's not why you're straightening nails.
Yeah.
You know, he knew, obviously, but at the time I was like, why would we do that? Well, he was building sons.
Yeah.
You know, that's why he created those jobs for us. He was building sons.
In the words of Stephen R. Covey, raise boys, not grass, right? Like he was teaching you how to work and
well, if you'd seen our property, there wasn't much grass. There's more weeds than grass.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah. So growing up with 4 other brothers, right? So you're one of 5 brothers. How do you feel like that impacted you and like your relationships growing up with them, with your family? Like what did that dynamic kind of look like? And like as you got into high school, friends, sorts of things you were involved with, and how do you feel like that kind of changed the trajectory of your life?
Well, I love my brothers. They're the best. James is the oldest, John, David, Joseph, Benjamin. Those are all of us. And being the youngest, I had the benefit of learning and observing from their mistakes. I mean, honestly, and I look at parenting now. I have 4 beautiful children of our own with Jelena, and I can see that the first 2 or 1 I've raised differently now than the last couple. And so by the time my parents got to me, I think my 4 older brothers had kind of worn them down a little bit. The rules had relaxed quite a bit, and that's often the case with the youngest. But I really did benefit from my brothers because there was never a moment that I saw my brothers not working. And that was just the expectation in the Petzinger home. Whether it was working on our farm or on whatever project that my dad had for us, or it was working for someone else. I mean, anything from stacking hay was a common thing that we did every summer. We worked for the Corn family. It was a corn dairy off Cherry Lane in Nampa. We moving water, moving pipe, topping corn, any type of farm or manual labor that was us. And even at a very young age, the first job I had was picking raspberries. And I remember getting paid in coins and looking at that and thinking about, I just spent the day picking raspberries through spider-infested, prickly, hot, terrible conditions. And I don't even know what I have in my hands. I didn't even know how to count up the coins. I had to have one of my older brothers explain to me. In fact, it was my brother John. He's like, okay, you got 75 cents. I was like, is that good? He's like, it's a start. It's one of those moments.
Yeah.
So I really did learn quite a bit from my brothers. They were just, of course we didn't always get along, but
Sure.
we're all very different. And, we all came out of the same factory, but we're all very different. I think that's why we get along well.
Yeah, no, I love that. So in high school, and you guys, I think where you and I have connected is that we have so many people in common, right? The very area that you're describing between, Wagner and Farmway and Ustick Road out there is where my mom grew up. So my grandparents lived in that area. We spent a lot of time out at my grandparents' house, having people in common that we knew, the Browns and the Buellers and other people like that. How do you feel like the community where you were raised and friendships, other connections like that, like what do you feel like the impact that has had on your life?
I've lived in a lot of different places in the U.S. since leaving Caldwell. After high school, I went straight to school. But I will always go back to answering when people say, okay, where are you from? I'm born and raised Caldwell, Idaho. And when I think of Caldwell, I do think of the people first and foremost. Lyle Bueller, we stacked his hay every year with Joel Brown. I don't think there's another man besides my own father that chewed me out more than that guy. And for a good reason. We were knuckleheads, and he wanted to make sure we were safe. And so I look at the generation that raised us in Caldwell and all of my friends and all their parents, both the moms and the dads. And I think that's what made it such an incredible time in history where we weren't distracted with the details of the digital age. I didn't have any camera evidence of the stupid things I did as a teenager. It's not like we were getting into terrible trouble or doing stupid things. We were pretty busy and working, but the parents of that age that raised us had pretty high expectations. And whether it was sports or work or academics, it was the perfect place for me to be raised, where I could have space to run. I had room to build 2-3-story forts, tree houses that were multi-levels, and with very little condemnation or judgment from my dad, he let it happen. He knew. We built a catwalk in the rafters of our barn that was 10 feet off the ground that we fell through all the time and just hopefully landed correctly. And it was excellent, non-structured time growing up. And that would have been the same at my house or any of my friends' house. We had that time to just grow and learn how to have fun without anybody filling that void with media and entertainment.
Totally. Well, I look back on a lot of my memories growing up, a lot of them being out at my grandparents' house out there, and some of the tree houses, like over at the Browns. That was one of our favorite things to do, was to go over there and go play in the tree house, playing in the barns or going down to the Buellers and just having like that unstructured time. I think for kids, like that is such a healthy thing. And I think helps with, we're talking about like the internal dialogue with your dad having with himself while he's out collecting firewood. But the same thing, like people don't just get bored really anymore, right? Like I think that for so many kids, parents will put a device in their hands or put something in front of them to distract them rather than having time to go think, to go find someone to go play with, to go make up something, to go build something, to say like, hey, like, let's go try this, let's go down there. And I think that, a lot of people get robbed of opportunities for self-development and growth and introspection when you always have something in your hand or in front of you to distract you rather than make you go, learn something.
Well, to your point, Aristotle, he one of his quotes is, nature abhors a void. I've studied that and tried to apply it to this topic right here. Another way of putting it is, if there's an empty space, nature's going to fill it. That's the law of nature. And we have created such comfort in our society, especially in the United States, that we have created time in the margins. And what has that void been filled with? Well, it's either we fill it as parents and mentors and coaches and just general adults that have children that we are responsible for. Either we help them fill it, or this will fill it. And what that fills it with is not what is to the benefit of those kids. And so I believe that's a law of nature. And I think about, and all my brothers could share this exact same story. Let's say there's a Saturday afternoon. There's a ball game on, and we've got the tinfoil and the antenna angled just right to pick up KTVB. And we've watched the intro from Mark Johnson, and he's a stud. And we're like, okay, there's a game. We're going to see a game. And then I hear footsteps, and it will always be my dad wondering, where are they? And he'll come in. He won't even ask. He'll turn off the TV and he'll say, looks like you need something to do. TV's not it. To him, the void was the TV. Today, if we had kids that all they wanted to do was watch TV, I think we'd be like, that's pretty. Yeah. It's a lot better than what they can find on that
watch
phone.
A ball game, yeah.
And so the void was then filled, and it was filled with, put a tool in your hand, show you how to use the tool. And I've heard a lot of people say that they were born on third base, and there's a lot of advantage and a lot of a leg up on things. I was born on third base of work ethic. And it's not to brag. That was by force. As a kid, I didn't volunteer for all that. I did it begrudgingly, just like any other kid. But I do remember instances where, young enough to stare at a fence panel, so I would have been 6 or 7, and my dad wanted me to learn how to paint. Puts a paintbrush in my hand, immediately takes it out of my hand and says, you're doing it wrong. He shows me how to dip the paintbrush in a pail or a bucket of paint, how to strike it off, get just the right amount, how to work it into the wood. And I remember thinking, oh, I know how to do that. Anybody knows how to paint, even at a young age. But he wanted to show me every step so that he could leave that task to me and go on to something else. And he would show me how to do it over and over and over again, to the extent that I got impatient. And I'm clamoring to grab the brush out of his hand. And then I realize he's not giving the brush back to me because he enjoys it. He just enjoys working. I can see it in him. He loves this. And he paints the whole panel and leaves like a third of it for me to do. And I'm furious at him. That's a psyops on how to teach somebody how to work, is to show them how much you love it. And then all of a sudden this kid's like, give it to me. I got to paint. I can't handle this anymore. And there I was, all of a sudden begging to do the work. And then, wind me up, turn me loose the rest of the day. And that was one of his methods of teaching us. I understand it today, but it took decades to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, to your point, anyone could convince themselves that they're a victim if they looked hard enough, right? Everyone's had hard things, bad things, disadvantages in their life. But at the same time, everyone's also had opportunities. And in some cases, people having less or what seem like disadvantages actually end up being advantages. You could take any situation. Well, this kid came from a family that didn't have anything. Okay, well, he also had an opportunity to go make his own path. He wasn't born into something where someone was trying to force him to go down their road of life, or what they thought, or this is the way that our family does things. So I'm thoroughly convinced that every situation has a silver lining to it, right? It has a positive and a negative, has virtue and a vice, if you want to see it called that way. But I think that that's such a healthy way to look at it, and say, you know what, like, I was born on third base in ways where I was given unfair advantages by these things that I was taught, right? And choosing to see it that way rather than to choose it to see it like, oh yeah, I had all these hardships, I had all these terrible things, my dad was an immigrant, whatever the case is. I think that anyone could make excuses and talk themselves into victimhood if they really wanted to. To sum up that first question, we may have delved in a little bit longer than you wanted to, but
that's what I think about when people ask where I grew up, because we've lived all over the country, and it's with such gratitude that I think about those early days of just if it was a struggle, I didn't realize it. It was what it was, and it's helped me now to face challenges a little bit differently, just a little bit of a different perspective. I can work my way through a lot of stuff, but I'd rather use my brain also. And I think at an early age, working smarter rather than harder really wasn't in the equation. I had to figure that out later.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. So after high school, let's kind of talk about what were next steps for you. What did life look like? You graduate from high school, eventually meet Jelena. What did that look like? Those steps in between there, kind of like your, early adult years.
So graduated Caldwell High School, class of 1994. A lot of great friends, just lifelong friends. It went straight to Brigham Young University as a freshman. And in the late 80s, early 90s, I was completely fascinated with Russia, with the fall of communism. A lot of that had to do with my dad. He spoke Russian fluently. He learned that from a friend that was from East Germany as a kid, brought that skill with him, furthered his studies at University of Utah, and he taught Russian in high school. So I took 4 years of Russian from my dad. I had traveled to Russia while I was in high school. It was one of the first opportunities for a kind of a summer travel abroad student exchange, and saved up a lot of money to do that. That wasn't on mom and dad's scholarship, so that was a big deal to divert that kind of money at that time to travel.
And this is just right after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? So, I mean, this is not many years after. So
it was 1993.
Yeah,
is the first time I went and traveled to the former Soviet Union.
Yeah,
they were right in the middle of converting from to the Russian Federation, and so. In fact, while I was there, I was in a smaller city in the Kubansky region. It was called Krasnodar. And on the other side of the Caucasus Mountains is Odessa, and was able to travel over there to Sochi in that region, and didn't even know the Olympics would ever be there. But I was able to see that city as a young person, and it was an incredible experience to travel, speak the language, live with a family. And so that was the summer before my senior year of high school. And so went to BYU, continued my Russian studies. I thought I was going to be in political science, just had to declare a major. And my parents, so I was the last one, and so my parents decided that they would go live in Russia because my dad could do a sabbatical leave, and he went and worked and taught in a Russian high school.
Wow.
And my mom volunteered at a university in the library. And so she was helping teach English. And so I thought, man, I don't have any obligations. I just did a semester of school. They're living there. So I pulled my tuition money back from BYU, bought a plane ticket, and it was the winter of 95. So late December of 94 through May of 95, I lived in Saratov. And did a lot of studying, a lot of travel. I traveled to the Siberian side of the Ural Mountains, stayed there for about a month, just did a lot of exploring, lived on I guess it would be the equivalent of a nature preserve, worked with the Forest Service people. Jelena has a hard time believing this, but I was actually on cross-country skis for the better part of 3 weeks.
Wow.
Traveling in the Siberian mountains. Incredible experiences. 3 days on a train, one direction, 3 days back by myself, transferring through big cities. Awesome experience for me. And so after that, just to wrap it up, volunteered to serve as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Spoiler alert, the mission call was to Moscow.
Wow.
So from 1995 to 1997, I was in Moscow, Russia. One of the greatest experiences of my life, hands down. And I've told my sons, keep a journal. So my oldest son, he served in Los Angeles. in the downtown core. And then Bryson, that's Colton that served in Los Angeles. Bryson is now serving in Fort Worth, Texas, Spanish speaking. My biggest advice to them is write it down. It's going to take the rest of your life to unpack what's happening on your mission.
Yeah.
So missionary service was incredible. And came back to the States and dove right back into school.
How do you feel like your mission experience helped shape the rest of your life, and it's helped shape you as a leader, your work ethic, your ability to communicate with people, to do hard things, all sorts of things? How do you feel like the mission impacted that?
Well, to a large extent, missionaries are, I don't want to say they're on their own, but they do have quite a bit of self-determination of how they're going to spend that 2 years. And I think about today when I work with a young professional in commercial construction, and if there's an opportunity for somebody to travel and, if they're away from their family, the one advice I give them is you're going to learn a lot about yourself when you are away from the trappings of home, from the comforts, the typical routines. For me, I really leaned on my experience of having traveled there and lived there previously. So the culture shock wasn't severe. I hit the ground running. I had the years of Russian language in high school and at BYU. And so language to me was not the barrier. The barrier to me was my pride. 100%. The barrier to me was getting over myself and being humble enough to rely on the Holy Ghost to help me find people in an ocean of people. I mean, there were 12 million people in Moscow in the boundaries of my mission, and there were, I think, 120, 150 of us. So the math is simple. That's 100,000 people that I felt responsible for, and that weight was significant. But of course, I'm not responsible for them, meaning my job was to deliver the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then teach. If they're willing to listen, we teach. That's what we were there to do. And so it taught me quite a bit about managing my own time, being committed to the decision I made. A really good friend of mine summed up, I think, what I'm trying to say with his definition of integrity, which I've adopted. And I'll give credit. This is Matt Barrow. He owns Viewpoint Windows and Doors, a great friend of mine. We were snowmobiling one day, and I'm going to blame it on him. I'm going to say he got stuck in the ravine. He'll probably say I got stuck. But
someone was stuck.
Probably me. And you got to commit to the throttle on a snowmobile. And later in the day, to get unstuck, you have to commit. And later in the day, he said, the definition of integrity is following through with the decision once the emotion of making that decision has passed. And that stuck with me. I spent some time with him at his house in St. George with him and Michelle just recently on spring break. And we talked about that again. And he's such a close, dear friend because he's a guy that has integrity. And I look for people like that to be friends with, and I really thrive around that because I know if Matt says he's going to do something, the emotion of that's awesome. And think about how fun it is to make plans. But when the emotion has passed, are you really going to follow through with that? And I think that's applicable to whether it's a young person going on a mission or somebody deciding a career change or a health change or anything. There's a lot of emotion in making decisions because we visualize where we're going, but then that eventually wears off. And now you're stuck with, who are you? Are you really going to follow through with that? So that's one of the lessons I learned.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely love it. So you come home from your mission. What did those next steps look like after that?
Came home from my mission. My experience at BYU was not fun. College, university studies. Let me be careful. I had fun. I had great roommates, great memories, but I had no scholarship. I had no money, period. I mean, I was knocking doors in the summer with pest control in Southern California. I was back here in Boise working for ISI as a laborer, stocking sheetrock, begging, please let me learn how to do metal stud framing. I want to learn how to hang drywall. I want to learn how to texture. I need to learn how to mud and tape. Like at that time, most of the internships at BYU were penny loafers and suits and ties. And I might have that wrong. I may have a myopic view of what was out there, but none of them really suited me. I wanted to learn the trades because growing up, I was in the trades in a dysfunctional way with whatever my dad had going on. We were doing it. Masonry, framing, postal digging, whatever. And so my time at BYU was working, and class work was a necessary evil. And so I had a lot of odd jobs through college. The earn while you learn is what I was all about at BYU. And so I was lucky to make some good friends in the construction management program that had connections in construction. And so I was able to get construction jobs, framing, landscape, irrigation, you name it. If it was out there, I was doing it. And then for my anchor job, I was a driver for the Missionary Training Center in Provo. And completely stumbled into that job, was able to get hired, and I clocked in at 2:45 a.m., took a load of missionaries to the airport, came back, took a second load, came back, and then I was kind of a big deal on campus because I had a pager, and people thought I was really important. Not really, but it looked cool. But if they needed an emergency driver to take some documents somewhere or to take somebody to the airport, I was on call 24/7. And so in addition to that, I was had a fun job. I was a snowmobile guide at Snow West Snowmobile for Dick Warner. That was up in Park City, and worked with a bunch of my buddies up there. That was so fun. I did that Monday, Wednesday, Saturdays, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and then one Sunday a month based on the season, And so that's what kept me in school: tuition, rent, food. And so when I look back at school, it was a blur because I probably slept through most of my classes. And that's how I met my wife, actually, is she noticed this kid in the back of the class asleep with my hat down. It was
she was probably sitting right up front, super studious, locked in.
100%.
Raising her hand, answering all the questions.
Jelena was the all-star of BYU construction management. 100%. That's her. Yeah.
If you know Jelena, it's like that's no secret, right? It's like that's her to a T.
Yeah.
So you two meet, fall in love, get married.
Yeah.
What did that early life look like in your career? You graduated. If I remember right, you ended up transferring and finishing at Middle Tennessee State. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I actually took one of my first mentors on a snowmobile ride. It was Dave and Rachel Rigdon, came out from Atlanta. They were with America's Home Place. And just happenstance, one of these stories again, where they want to go snowmobiling in the Rocky Mountains. I show up for work. I recognize this guy as the executive who put on the, what do they call that when a construction company comes and gives a seminar?
Yeah.
He gave a seminar to BYU Construction Management. The tour was great, got on really well with Dave and Rachel. And Dave said, hey, we're hiring interns. You should apply. And I hadn't even thought of that. I mean, my version of an internship, again, not really working smart, just working hard, was I'm just going to go out and labor my way through this industry so I understand it. And I thought, sure, I'll try, and I'll apply. And I showed up late for the interview. I was framing a house in Mapleton, Utah, and a canyon wind had knocked all of the trusses over. Lessons learned. It was a disaster. And so I showed up covered in sawdust and dirt. All of my classmates are in suits and ties. Is this a mission reunion? What the heck is going on here? I didn't know it was this kind of an internship. So I get in and I said, I apologize. I'm a mess. I didn't have time to change or shave or anything. And they said, no, you're actually the only one that dressed for the interview. And Dave, he hired me. that's when I met Jelena, because she was already working for America's Home Place in Gainesville, Georgia. And so I went out there to do that internship. That's how we met. I had to cull her from the herd of all the good-looking guys at BYU. She really had no options, Cam. I was it. I traveled out there. She had graduated BYU without a serious relationship, really. And I showed up, and when I say the rest is history, that's the beginning of the best part of my life, honestly.
I love that. So moving forward into your career, how do you feel like your relationship with Jelena has helped you with, your family, the stability at home? The highest earners in society are married men with children, right? And I don't think that's by any coincidence. I think that when you have a supportive spouse, when you have people that depend on you, when you, know that, hey, it's either going to happen with me or it's not going to happen, that pushes you and drives you to be able to excel and to accomplish great things. How do you feel like being a husband and a father has pushed you and helped you to become better and more driven in your career?
Well, I've said this and had this discussion with Jelena many times. If I made her billable rate, I'd be in a better situation. She's the smartest person I know, and especially in construction. I mean, she was raised in the industry. My father-in-law has a very accomplished reputation in the industry as a CFO for Oakland Construction. He was there for 40 plus years. And so she grew up in the industry. She knew the Oakland family quite well. And she is the core of support that I need. And I realize more and more how much I rely on her to, and it's not to subcontract out the responsibility at home, but I rely on her to help me understand where I'm off.
Yeah.
And it happens often. And she is not shy from telling me, you're off. You're distracted. You're not carrying your weight. And I really appreciate that with her. And so there has never been a sense of competition with Jelena in the professional realm. I support her 100%, and she is running 110 miles an hour with her ambitions in life, and I'm 100% behind her, because when it came time for us to make hard decisions of her putting her career on hold, as you mentioned, I transferred from BYU to Middle Tennessee State to study concrete industry management. That was in 2000. And her career kept going as we lived in Murfreesboro, and she was managing several offices of a residential builder. I was in school. I started our first business while I was in school, so I could just keep going. I didn't want to just be a student, and it was a fun experience, a learning experience to do precast basement walls, and that's a whole nother story. But she's always supported me, and I really want to underscore the importance when it comes to finding a partner in this life. Find somebody that you don't feel like you have to compete with, because you have to have a good partner, especially when there's decisions that may elevate one, or maybe somebody feels like they're not elevated. That's all got to wash away, because it's one team.
It's we, not me.
Yeah. And I've, we've been married for 25 years, and I've always felt that she supports us, and it's not, she's making a choice. And I see her in her career and what she's doing now with, we just bought a business in Ketchum. It's called Covered, and they do custom, beautiful window coverings. It's an established business, and she really thought hard about how to make that successful. What can she do to help that company? Software as a service. She's got projects that she's working on now in the construction accounting world. And so as a dad and having hard discussions with her on moving, I mean, if I go through the list, Atlanta, Nashville, Chicago, Window Rock, Arizona, you might need to look that up on a map, Bayfield, Colorado, Ketchum, Idaho, Salt Lake City, Boise. So we've moved 8 times. And I give all the credit to her in her willingness to take on an adventure, take on a new challenge, and make sure that our kids are prepared and that they're up for the challenge as well.
No, she's a remarkable person. Anyone that knows her, you're not overstating or exaggerating at all. That every time I have a conversation with Jolene, I'm like, she's smarter than I am. Like, she's very intelligent.
I get to go home to that every day, realizing I'm not really smart at all.
Well, and really, I think the silver lining, the blessing to that is that she pushes you, right? Like, you naturally push yourself to become better because you're going to become a byproduct of the people that you spend your time around, right? Like, show me your circle and I'll show you your future. It's like, if you're married to someone that's highly intelligent, highly capable, willing to do hard things, committed to making your family the best, like, that's the best cheat code you can have. And like, I look at my wife, Melanie, and it's the same sort of thing where I'm a byproduct of the influence that she has on me, right? Like, your friends are a big influence on you. Your network's a big influence on you, but no one's a bigger influence than your spouse.
Yeah.
No one's a bigger influence than, the people that you spend the most time around. And so I truly believe that the best hack anyone can ever get is go marry someone that's better than you.
Yeah.
Go marry someone that is what you aspire to be.
Yeah.
And they're going to help you to get there.
Yeah. We have 4 kids. Our oldest, Colton, just recently got married. His wife, Jordan, unbelievable how amazing this young lady is. And to have her in our family is a huge blessing. And Colton knows that. Like, he's a smart young man. He's in school. He's studying, and he really lucked out. And so that's the same I wish for Bryson and for Anna and for Demi is find somebody that's going to be a partner and not in a competition with.
Yeah. No, love that. So you guys moved 8 times throughout your career. I'm guessing in most of those cases it was either the job required you to move or there was some sort of an opportunity. Careers, I think some people think, are just often linear, right? Like, I'm here and it's just going to look like this. I'm going to get promoted every 2 years. I'm going to make more money. Things are just going to go on a very linear path to where I get to where I'm going. And my experience has been that that's not the case, right? Like, it's like this.
Yeah.
Right. And, sometimes you make a decision on something and it turns out not to be the right one. Sometimes you have to, pivot or change. Sometimes you have to go inconvenience yourself or go move or go do what it takes to seek after different opportunities. Maybe talk to me for a minute about what those challenges have been as you've moved or as you've sought out different opportunities as you've tried to grow in the industry, and what your experience has been that way.
Well, I agree with you that a lot of career expectations are for linear growth with rocket fuel in the tank.
Yeah.
That it's not a slow burn, but it's an immediate just explosion of success. I'll illustrate that with just a couple experiences that I had. When I was at Middle Tennessee State, our department chair, Austin Cheney, another one of my great mentors, that guy, first of all, he sold the program to me as a great career move in an education, and I believed him and I saw it and I loved the curriculum. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, I want you to take an interview with this radio program." I don't remember the name. I'm sure there's whiz bangs out there that are going to go search this now. But they wanted to interview a student from Middle Tennessee State because it was a relatively new program in the country, accredited 4-year. And the interview went well. The guy interviewing me had a question that really it actually got under my skin a little bit, but I didn't want to show that I was annoyed. This is more or less what he asked. How does it feel to be in a VOTEC program in a 4-year university? So clearly he was being condescending, which means to talk down to. And so I was like, man, this is a classic question from an elite Ivy Leaguer. And I said, well, let me answer the question with this question. What is the difference between a large pizza and a history major? And I just let that marinate. And he said, well, it's actually really, really interesting. My daughter is a history major at Northwestern, and this ought to be an interesting answer. And so I said, well, a large pizza can feed a family of 4. And the moral of that is I'm not against people learning history. Awesome. That's great. But career trajectories are built on people willing to go work and apply knowledge. And I'm very biased because I'm in the construction industry. I love it. I'm one of the lucky ones. I love what I do. And my first job out of college would illustrate your question. If someone had this expectation that they have a diploma in their hand and now they're going to go conquer the world. My first job in Chicago, Illinois, my boss, Lee Popovich, he said, your first assignment is a fire station downtown Chicago. It has settled. We're putting in helical piers. We're going to raise the building and salvage the building because my passion at the time was concrete restoration and repair. And that was with the structural group. And they're Baltimore-based, but they do incredible projects. I was so interested in that because it was the perfect combination of concrete and construction. First job, I show up, they hand me a shovel and say, go dig a bunch of holes. I spent a week digging holes in an alleyway behind this building. After a week, Lee calls me into the office. How's it going out there? I said, fine. It's great. We're hooking up the saddles. I'm hammer drilling. I've got the epoxy set. We're about ready to bring in the skid steer with the hydraulic ram. I'm understanding the foot-pounds of torque and how we're going to do this. He's like, you're not going to complain about digging holes all week? I said, Lee, if you're going to pay me this much to dig holes, I'm good with it. You think I don't know how to dig a hole? This is fine. I'm learning a lot.
I grew up in Caldwell, Idaho, digging holes.
Yeah, PhD, post hole digger, right? It was a great experience. He and I bonded quickly, and then he sent me to a certification class in St. Louis within a couple weeks to get my certification in helical piers. So lean in is the point. If somebody wants a career trajectory that's got some rocket fuel, lean into the task. There's a reason somebody gave you the task. If it's digging a hole, figure out everything there is to know about that task. Lean into it. Become the expert. If you can't become an expert in 40 hours of digging holes, then you're just digging holes. Yeah. You're not trying to advance your career.
Yeah. No, I love that because, and we just have like back and forth on this because I'm so passionate about people acquiring skill sets, right? Like one of the reasons I jokingly say that I want to do this podcast because I feel like it's a cheat code for me to just get to sit down with A+ people and to get to talk and learn and ask questions that I'd want to know. But I'm so passionate about people developing skill sets, not just getting a degree or a piece of paper and thinking that that's somehow going to magically pay you, right? Like there's a joke that says that people get degrees to work for people that don't have degrees, right? To show that you're qualified to work for people that don't have them. And in so many cases that is true, right? And having gone to school and earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, like I feel that there is value to formal education, but a lot of that value comes in the network that you gain, in the connections that you make, in having to learn how to balance taking classes, working, doing all that stuff, like all the stuff that you just talked about with balancing your time and feeling stretched thin. Like I was talking to a kid last night that I mentor, and he was like, I just don't know what I want to do. I said, that's fine. You don't have to have it figured out right now. Just go do something that's hard for you. Go take more classes than you think you can take. Go get a job that's hard, that's going to push you. Like take more on your plate than you know how to do. And you're magically going to go develop this skill set that as you look back over your career, it's like, oh, that ended up being my superpower. My superpower ended up being that I just knew how to do hard things better than most people did. I could go dig holes for 10 hours a day because I'd grown up doing that kind of stuff, right? Like I could just go do it. I could go take 21 credits and go work full time because I'd grown up doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like that seemed normal to me. And so oftentimes people feel entitled to wanting a promotion or additional compensation when in reality they're being passed up by people that had less advantages than they had, maybe even had less qualifications than they had. But at the end of the day, they're just willing to do what other people aren't willing to do, right? There's the parable of the oranges that I often share and talk to our team about. But basically just the difference between two employees that both wanted the same promotion, and one was just doing the bare minimum of, okay, hey, boss asked for oranges, I went and got oranges. The other person went and, what kind of oranges? What do they need them for? how many we're going to need, like asking the right questions, getting a discount from the grocer, figuring out which ones were going to be the best for juice because that's what they were going to use it for, and just going the extra mile. Like that is what creates someone's value. Like that is where you will find opportunities, is when you just try to make the lives of other people around you easier. Someone's not asking you to do a task just to go do a task. Someone's asking you to do something because it's part of a bigger problem that they have. And the more of other people's problems and the more complex those problems that you're able to solve, the greater your value becomes. And so I just think that, if I could share something with young people today, I feel like that's like one of the biggest messages. Like, go gain a skill set, go become valuable, go work harder than you think that you're supposed to, go take on more responsibility, go be the person that just raises their hand and says yes. And even if you don't know how to do it, go figure it out. And that's what creates so much value. I don't know what, let you kind of share your experience and take on that, but just advice to young people and setting themselves up.
Yeah, I've made some really big mistakes with that train of thought, that my number one responsibility as a leader is to solve other people's problems before they become my problems. So I want to back up a little bit. The skill set that someone in the industry that wants to emerge as a competent person, that's the key. We see competence in commercial construction, residential is the same. We see that first and foremost. So how do you gain that competence? Well, it's not by wishing it to happen. You can wish cast your way to, you call it promotions or career, but it's competency that really, at the end of the day, is the commodity that's noticed. And so there has to be a can-do mentality when a task is given, because it's a smaller piece of a bigger puzzle, but it's the tactical side of learning step 1, step 2, step 3. And there are chapters and phases of careers where you're going, and even throughout the day, I'll be spending a lot of time in a tactical situation, but eventually I need to graduate into the strategic side. And so as I work with new people in the industry, or I'm talking to construction management majors at Boise State, often invited there to share a couple thoughts with them and teach a class. Embrace the tactical side, learn the steps, so that when you're asked to have a strategic mind, you understand why you did it that way. And far too often in that meteoric expectation of career, it's, I just want to go straight to the strategy. It's the exact same thing I saw in the drafting world. Now, I'm not a draftsman. I don't have that skill set, but I saw the industry change from two-dimensional board drafting to all of a sudden everything is a click of a mouse. Well, I can tell you that the quality of the details and the drawings haven't really kept up with the technology.
Yeah.
And if By Others was a construction company, they'd be doing pretty well, because a lot of those gaps are the tactical side, and then we have to figure it out on the job site. And so for young people that are interested, and I can speak to, construction, just embrace that phase of your life of learning the tactical side so that the strategic side pays off. That's the advice I would give.
Advice to someone who's considering going into a career in the construction industry, right? I think that there's kind of been this, it's an interesting like cyclical wave that I look at throughout the course of my career, right? 20 years ago, going into the construction industry was kind of coming, I think early 2000s, it was like a really cool thing to go into construction. Construction was booming, economy's doing really well, tons of building, production home builders all over the country, commercial construction, whatever it was, like construction was doing pretty well. And then the crash of '08 hits, and it couldn't have been less attractive, right? And I'm in school at the time, right? I came home from my mission in November of 2007, start school January of 2008, and everyone's like, "You're going into construction? I thought you were smart. Like, why don't you go do something else? Like, why don't you go into medicine or something like that, right?" And then you see this wave coming back now where, and I'm a firm believer in this, like virtually all the metrics that I look at, in the next 5 to 7 years, plumbers will make more than doctors, right? And in a lot of cases, they already do. But if you are someone that wants to go learn a trade, go develop a skill set, go create value around that, your earning potential is going to be limitless, right? There will be tons and tons and tons of opportunities in the trades, owning your own businesses, working in the industry, because these are things that are not easily replaced by steps in technology, right? Like attorneys, accountants, doctors, all those kinds of things are largely going to be replaced. There will be some, but there'll be way fewer because technology will be able to replace so many of those jobs in the industry right now. Whereas in construction, that's not the forecast.
Yeah.
Right. And so what would be your advice to someone considering going into a career in construction?
Two things come to mind right away. The conversation I had with my dad when I declared the major at BYU of construction management. His one observation was, "Are you sure?" Because construction is nothing but peaks and valleys, and all the peaks are greased. This is a guy that when he immigrated, the only jobs he could get were labor, respectful labor jobs. He was a mason. In the old country, you would test aptitude at a young age, and you had two paths to take. One was the skilled craft. The other was academics. Well, his academic side was drafting. His craft side was masonry. So he learned both. We would do ourselves a huge favor in this modern age to just face reality and help these young people know where their aptitudes are. There's not a bad or good here. If it's a skilled trade, that's excellent, as you pointed out. And so that was his first reaction to me. The other one that I would say is you better love it. You better love construction. It needs to be in your DNA. As I've looked at my family history on both sides back a few generations, my great-grandfather was a Zimmermeister. Ludwig Petzinger Zimmermeister, Darmstadt, Germany. That means he was a master carpenter. Well, how do you get to be a master at anything? So if you have any 12-year-olds that are going to listen to this, grab your phone. And a 24-hour day, take 8 hours off of that for sleep. Take 8 more off of that for school. Take an hour off of that for meals. If you're in a sport or you're in a music or you're in some sort of extracurricular, take a couple hours off of that. On average, a 12-year-old will have between 5 and 6 hours of free time, discretionary time a day. And we talked about filling the void. You take that by 6 years, and they're going to have over 10,000 hours of time. So anybody interested in construction, earn while you learn, because you can do that at a young age. There are ways to do that. Is a young person going to fill that void with something that helps them later in life? Or are they going to fill it doom scrolling through whatever the media is trying to fill that void with? There's such an opportunity for young people to capture that vision of what they're going to do with their time. And if it is construction, work with your parents, work with the people around you, go mow the yard, get started. How about you don't cut your foot off and learn a little bit about safety? There's things that these young people can do. The other thing is work-life balance. Everybody talks about work-life balance. Garbage, Cam. Garbage. I say that because I'm going to say garbage for me. I'm not going to lecture anybody else out there. I have had to come to terms with, if I'm going to put my life on a fulcrum, on a teeter-totter, and every day I'm going to say I have to balance this out, then I'm going to fail every day. There's some part that's going to fail. Either I'm going to feel like I'm neglecting the important duties at home as a provider, as a father, as a husband, whether volunteering in a church capacity, serving, or if I put too much time there, I'm failing at work. So I'm very cautious about the work-life balance visual. I have reconciled to the fact that I will not balance everything all the time, and I rather look at it as just spinning plates, the old circus act of spin one plate, get good at it, know that plate, know the rotations, know the wood dowel, understand how that's going to look when it starts to slow down. Get another one spinning, get a third one spinning. But you know every single plate, and you've taken the time to be the master, 10,000 hours. We know that's the figure to be a master at something. The people that do that circus act, they know before we do when that plate's going to start to rattle. That's how they know to go just directly to that plate. And I have found that managing the demands of life in plates is a lot easier mentally than the fulcrum of win or lose. And I just don't think we're in a net zero proposition with that. And so I see a lot of young dads in this industry. They beat themselves up. They know that the job has significant stress and demand. They know that their home life has significant obligation. And there are chapters where you have to lean in, and sometimes you can lean out. And I guess I'm going right back to having a good spouse, because when I've had to lean in at work, I know that things on the home front are taken care of because Jelena she's just awesome. She's got it. And she can sympathize and understand, hey, Ben's going to have to be a little bit absent-minded for a bit because we've got some deadlines, some projects, some demanding clients, and that's where he's going to be. But he'll come back because when that plate starts to wobble, she relies on me to come back and keep that moving.
Yeah.
That has really taken a lot of the stress out of my life in looking at it that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. And I think that one of the points that you're illustrating is that the better that you become, right? Like the more developed your skill set becomes, the better you are at maintaining all of those things. And so I tell young people all the time, go get really, really, really good at whatever you're doing. Go become the top 1% in the world at whatever it is you do or whatever you want to go into or be good at. Go relentlessly, go be ruthlessly ambitious at becoming the best at that so that people will pay you for your skill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pretty soon, it's not strictly dependent on the amount of time that you put in. Right? When you're young and you don't have any skills, the only thing you have to trade is energy and time. Like that's it.
Exactly.
You don't know anything else. But the more value you gain, the more experience you gain. So then it just becomes a matter of how can I expedite my ability to learn? How can I compress 30 years of experience into 2? What can I read? What can I study? What can I listen to? Who can I get mentored by? How can I learn as much as I can learn? Talking about using that discretionary time every day. How can I go compress that in such a way that I can be as valuable as someone that's been in the industry for 30 years? I can be that valuable in 5.
What are you going to fill the time with?
How do you go do it? Right? Yeah.
I would love for any kid of any age to grab their phone and do that in front of mom and dad at the dinner table and then put a plan together.
Yep.
How am I going to fill this time? What goal do I have? Better yet, kids kind of their eyes glaze over when they hear goal setting sometimes. Fine. Change it to bucket list. What's on your bucket list? What do you want to accomplish? Yeah. And I think there's a great potential there for kids.
We started a project a couple years ago with my oldest son, Cannon, where, and I've told this story a couple of times, but we talked about him starting a business when he got into high school. He says, okay, you're 13 right now. At the time, he's now 15. At the time he was 13, I said, okay, let's identify a project that you can work on this summer. He'd have weight training and speed and agility and basketball and football and stuff too that had to fit in there and other responsibilities around the house. I said, okay, this summer your project is going to be to identify 20 people that you know have a connection to. You're going to reach out to them and you're going to go set up an interview with them. So you got to get their contact information. You're going to call them or text them or reach out to them, schedule an interview with them. You got to come up with 20 questions that you would want to know for each of those people. Do you know enough about that person to ask them 20 insightful questions? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Okay, then I need to go start doing enough homework on that person so that I can come up with 20 insightful questions ahead of time. So 20 people, 20 questions each. So that was the homework he had to put together. He had to reach out to those people, had to schedule the interviews, had to go actually have the interview, and then write a report afterward on what he learned from each of those people. All this in preparation so that later, now it's, okay, I'm going to go identify a handful of businesses that I could potentially start or purchase.
Oh, yeah.
So now I go look at those things. I've taken everything I've learned from these mentors. I'm now identifying businesses. I'm building out pro formas on what each of these businesses would look like. And now next summer, it's going to be actually going an X meeting, right? But just things like that, where I want to give my kids an unfair advantage in life, right? I want to teach them those kinds of things so that you actually come out with a skill set. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we take 18-year-olds that have gone through the public education system and have no skills whatsoever to show for it. And it's like, well, they read Lord of the Flies and they did some math problems and they, learned some history stuff and colored some, maps and did a few things and graduated, because that's, the bare minimum. Talking to Debbie Critchfield about this a little while back, the superintendent of public education in Idaho. And to get kids to have hands-on learning. And I think that so much of that has to start at home and with the parents and helping them intentionally go develop a skill set, but like getting your kids to be active participants in their own education, in their learning, and for the parents to take,
100%. I 100% agree. And when I look back at any sense of accomplishment I had in high school, or I would put this in the top 3 accomplishments of my entire life thus far. It has to do with pigs. It has nothing to do with construction. Didn't know it at the time, but that was the first business that I had actually stumbled through. I asked my dad if I could raise hogs. We had land, we had facilities. He said, absolutely. So he drops me off at Treasure Valley Livestock. I'm 12 years old. He's the principal of Saturday school. I have cash in my pocket. He said, well, be careful if you raise your hand because you might buy something. So just watch out. I was like, I don't know what that means. So I get in there. And this is about that learning and embracing the awkward of, I'm just a kid in here with a bunch of adults and I'm going to try to buy a pig. I'll figure out how this works. Long story short, figured out a lot of lessons. Raised hogs through high school as they do the work. I feed them. They do the work. I'm at other jobs, but that's residual income in a way. Feed them twice a day, keep them with plenty of water, keep them healthy, figure out a breeding program. Now I don't have to go buy pigs.
I'm making my own pigs.
I had a problem with, feed is really expensive. And my dad had a suggestion, why don't you go talk to the manager at Land O'Lakes Granary right there in Caldwell, right across the street from the printing press. And that was awkward. I was like, hey, could I clean up some of your spillage? And the guy's like, sure, you can't come inside the plant, but he showed me around back where the grain elevator was and all the spillage. All of a sudden, my overhead goes to effort. I don't have to buy feed. I just have to go collect it. And I really hadn't put a whole lot of thought to that until a couple years ago. I took, 3 or 4 steers to the sale barn. I just needed to call them out. And I went up to the desk at Treasure Valley Livestock, and they said, okay, what's your name? I said, Ben Petzinger. And she types it in, and she says, are you still at 16491 Lonkey Lane? I'm like, man, not for 35 years, actually. How do you have my information? And she turned the screen, and they had modernized all of their records. Every transaction was there. That experience was so humbling to just see it, to see because it sucked. It was terrible at times. But to see it later in life, I was like, that taught me so many lessons and built up so many calluses to awkward situations that it's something that is probably one of the greatest moments is to see the transactions of selling pigs. And I wasn't in it for 4-H, nothing against 4-H, but I was in it for the money.
Yeah.
That's how school was paid for. That's how the mission was paid for. That's how trips to Russia were paid for. And I didn't even own a car till I was 22 years old. I was borrowing cars, And so those little steps of just learn while you earn is important. And I'm not a pig farmer today, but if I had to be, no problem. No problem. I'll do it. And with my own kids, we raise cattle. We have breeding. We have feeding. We have weaning. We have all of the things that go with it. And I know they hate it. I know, well, at times. I know they do. And I know that when it's 6 a.m. and they're out there, whatever weather, and they're feeding those cows, someday they'll figure out, oh, actually, Dad didn't need to raise cows. He could have had better feeding operations. He could have had better equipment. Why did he do things that way? I don't care about the cows as much as I do them. And it just gives them an opportunity to do that. And so that's the whole earn while you learn. And they're learning, and they keep the revenue on the sales of the beef. And it's something unique that they can pull lessons from as they do their sports and they work. And so I just hope kids can get out there and get creative. And just because you live in a city or a subdivision and you don't have access to changing water and learning how to move pipe or something like that, okay, don't romanticize that. That's just because I was in the 90s. But if you're in a subdivision and comfortably set in a comfortable life, you can still go find work to do. People will take you up on the offer to help them, and they will actually pay you, and you can learn from that.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to start for free.
Yeah.
Right? I was listening to something earlier this morning where a guy was telling his story about getting into his business. And he said, I just went to people and said, hey, look, I'll come do this for free. Like, let me come learn for you. I'll come work for you for free. Like, let me come observe your business or be around you or, learn how to do this and go do stuff for free. Go learn a skill set that eventually someone will pay you for, right? Like, you can go create value that eventually someone will compensate you for and, take those opportunities to be able to learn whatever that is. If it may not be raising pigs, but it may be creating social media content or something like that. But just be willing to go do what other people aren't willing to go do. And you're going to get wherever you want to go.
I love that. There's so much smarter ways to make money than raising pigs.
Well, now, right?
Yeah, now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
Well, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. And hopefully everyone learned as much today as I did. So appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me on. This has been wonderful. Appreciate it.
Yep.